82% of surveyed performing arts ticket buyers under the age of 75 watch embedded videos on websites. 37% of them are watching at least once a week, and 13% are watching those embedded videos at least once per day. And by the way, this is compared to just 4% of patrons watching embedded videos daily in 2017. I think this is particularly important to note because 90% of customers across industries say videos help them make buying decisions, and also studies show that video on landing pages is capable of increasing conversion rates by over 80%. Also, 88% of surveyed arts buyers in 2019 use YouTube, and fully 20% of them use YouTube at least once a day, which is up from 9% in 2017. Only 32% of those video views were cat videos. That was actually not a question in CI's most recent ticket buyer study. Maybe it should be next year. It will be released in early 2020, so get excited. Age is actually the only factor we saw correlated to video consumption in the most recent ticket buyer study, not relationship to an organization, frequency of arts attendance, residential area, or any other media preferences. And even with that, 82% of surveyed arts patrons ages 65 and older reported watching videos on YouTube, and 12% of that age group are watching YouTube videos once a day or more. All of this goes to say that active and increasing online video viewing is one of the most consistent trends in user behavior for the last 3 years. And you've heard about that from a project at Google yesterday, all of yesterday's amazing Facebook content case studies. So I'm not actually going to tell you a personal story or ask for a show of hands for anything, because I know that we all know this in this room, though I am available during the break to show pictures of my dog for whoever is interested. So the idea, as Eric said, behind this panel is to give you some real actionable insights to help fuel that inspiration that we hope you're all feeling right now following that amazing video reel. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my panelists and start with Karen and Roland. You are both at arts nonprofits currently, and they're at very different places in their long-term video marketing strategy. So if you could each talk about how this became a priority at your organization.
Sure. Thank you. First off, amazing reel. I think it's such a good thing to see how our industry has grown in this area, and we've come a long way, and I know that's not easy for us all the time. So congratulations to everyone in the room and everyone who was up on the screen. New York City Ballet started investing in video, like 12 years ago now, back in 2017, and it started very, very small with a dancer who was chronically injured and who was forced to face the possibility of retirement at an early age. She had been creating content and blogging for a period of time, and so that was just kind of a natural transition for her and a place of interest. And the company supported that, and she was the first in-house video producer for New York City Ballet, starting again in 2007. Back then, zero budget. She was a one-woman gang, and we launched with some BTS of the making of a brand new Romeo and Juliet that the company was creating that year. It was a huge marketing campaign aside from this, but the video really stood out as something that was very sticky for an audience and we knew right then and there that this was a place that we needed to invest in. Fast forward 2 years, and this individual kind of flew the coop, got her wings, and she moved on, and there was a second dancer in the company who also, unfortunately and very sadly, was facing early retirement because of injury, and she kind of picked up the baton. And since then, we've just been growing year after year. Simultaneously with this, in about 2009, the institution went through a strategic planning process, and a big part of that was kind of taking stock in the company, not only from an institutional perspective, a brand perspective, but also from a financial perspective. The company had been running deficits for a while, and we were really looking and charged with reversing that. And so we kind of had to sit down and take a hard look at the institution. And one of the things that, as we were also an aging institution, was very important to us was to tell our story. I know we hear that a lot, but our founders, with every year progressing, people weren't, George Balanchine and Jerome Robbins, people were knowing them less and less. We have an incredibly vast repertory of ballets that we do every year, and it's a complicated thing to get through. And so we knew that in order for us to start to kind of chip away at those things, we were going to have to be able to tell our story, but not only tell our story in a way that was not kind of banging educationally, but passive in a way that people could learn about us, but be intrigued by us and become engaged with us a little bit more. And we knew we had to do it where they were, not where we are. And so that's kind of how the seed started. And we've just been going from there.
Roland?
Hi, everybody. I'm Roland. I work for Theater Squared. So I joined T2 in 2017, and video was a part of it. It was basically something that T2 just really hasn't really done before, because there was only one graphic designer that was whose job was pretty much to do a lot of the work that we all do in here, like the program. Doing key art, posters, and things of that sort. So there really wasn't people within the role to be able to branch out and do video. So when I came on board, there was an opportunity to really start exploring through this venue. At the time, we were 5 months into a 25-month build for this brand new 50,000 square foot facility that we just moved into in August. And this new facility pretty much doubles our seating capacity. We're now going to be performing in 2 venues rather than 1, and we also have an in-house cafe as well. So there was a lot of work to be done to not only improve single ticket sales, but also to convert those single ticket buyers into subscribers, and also just to tell the story of T2, right? Like, how is this venue going to improve the work that we already do? How is it going to elevate the area? Things of that sort. And my personal motto is show, don't tell, right? And what better way to do that than through video? So we've really made a concerted effort to be smart with the money that we have allocated toward video, and use strategic buys in the last 3 seasons I've been to purchase equipment that would allow us to tell these stories in different creative ways to try to increase single ticket buyers, subscribers, things of that sort. And I think we've been fairly successful. After my first year, single ticket revenue was up 40%. And as of this season, subscribers are up 95%. That video that was on the reel, that has really done a lot for us in terms of prepping our audiences for the season and what they can expect from us and this new venue that we moved into.
And what do you think the balance is right now in your organizations between more institutional or branding content versus content that's really focused on single tickets? And what are the different strategies for creating the videos themselves for each of those goals?
In preparing for this panel, I kind of was tallying up the different types of content that we create at New York City Ballet, and there are about, I'd say, somewhere about 15 different types of content that we create on any given year. And I think there's only really 3 of them that don't kind of provide opportunities for a wide range of people to engage with them. Something incredibly specific versus something that's bigger on an institutional level. But because our strategy at City Ballet is to create long-term libraries and long-term and content that will last for a long time, we're a repertory company, so things that we create can come back. And I know that we're in a very charmed position in that way that most people may not be. Everything serves the institution, but in any given season, it can also serve both our subscriber base and our single ticket base. So we think about that anytime we enter into a piece of content that we're creating.
I think when it first started, a lot of work was done mainly more to bolster single ticket sales, because that, again, when we've been producing in a 175 seat theater, and then we're moving into a space that can seat up to 300 in our main venue and 110 in the second one, a lot of work had to be done to be able to support this new audience that we're trying to attract, and also to to let people know what this new venue means for the city of Fayetteville and Northwest Arkansas in general. So I think at the beginning it was 90-10, mainly single ticket versus institutional. And as we've gone through the past 3 seasons and we've built together this library of clips, as to what the Theater Squared experience is, we've been able to, fix that ratio, to 60-40.
Cool. And this is always a tricky question, I think, but I know it's top of mind for a lot of people in the room. So I am going to ask you what kind of budget allocation towards video you started with and maybe have progressed to, if it's changed.
In the last 10 years, our budget for video, for content creation on the video side has doubled. Now, I will say that that's in the absence of growing budgets all around. So we're reprioritizing and moving monies that we have into that area because we know how important it is and the payoff that it gives us. So yeah, I mean, that said, it's about just under 10% of our over marketing expense budget. So we're not spending a huge amount as it pertains to the size of institution that New York City Ballet is and the goals that we have. And then there's also just the range of costs that we have in those 15 pieces of content that we create is vast. I mean, we can create a piece of content for a couple $100 because we've created this video, because we've invested in resources. The other point of growth in the institution is I told you we started with that one person. And we've always played off of a model where we capitalize on the kind of indie filmmaker scene in New York City. So we have, an unlimited pool of talent and creativity to pull from. But I think all over the country, people are making films on small and big levels, and that's something that I think everyone can tap into. But as our library grew and as the institution relied on us more and more for content development, education, press, you name it, we had to grow to a 2-person. And then just last year we grew to a 3rd person who's literally just kind of editing, taking what we have in-house, not high-level editing, very low-level editing. It's a very entry-level position for us, but who we're able to, on the fly, maximize what we're creating in the space. So we can take something for a couple $100 and create a piece of content that we call an anatomy of a dance. And it's basically just kind of a scene-by-scene, if you will, in a dance performance, depiction of the dancer describing what they're actually doing or what they're thinking or how they've prepared to create that sometimes, 90-second to 3-minute piece of choreography on the stage. And then, I think our concept videos, like you saw with Jihan for our art series, we do invest in those, and those can be somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000. Now, we're not doing that very often. And then when we take it back to brand and institution every year, because we have such a complex product and we have so many performances across a season that are different all the time, we do have to invest in the institution, and we do that in the form of a season marketing campaign. It's a much bigger effort for us, and it creates content for us not only from the video side, but from still photography side that we use for about 12 months straight, and that's well into the 6 figures. So the range is there, and it's really about scaling your operation and then understanding, how many different things you can approach and how many different ways you can approach content creation based upon the assets that you do have.
Thanks.
So for our budget, the part of the marketing budget that is allocated for video, we allocate around $60,000 annually for the entire season, and that helps us generate almost 1.1 million in single ticket and subscriber sales. So it can definitely be done in a very cost-effective and fiscally responsible way, and also generate a lot of revenue for your institution. One of the things that I wish that we're able to spend more on is more equipment. But even though I would love a mirrorless 4K camera setup, the amount of ROI that you would get for some really high-end gear, it's really hard to justify than the current setup that we're doing now. what has really revolutionized kind of like how we go about our workflow process has been getting a gimbal stabilizer and an iPhone. The video quality that we're getting with this setup, I think, is pretty much on par with what you get with prosumer or professional level equipment. And I think that our audiences probably can't even tell the difference what you use. So I think this has been pretty effective in that way.
So for comparative purposes here, just I know this is again important to all of you. You're spending $60,000. You've got a $1.1 million revenue goal, correct? And what's your overall annual budget, if you don't mind?
Around in the threes.
Okay. So take that to the other end where I'm living, and I'm spending about $355,000 on video creation every single year. I have a $4 million marketing budget, and I'm responsible for almost $40 million in revenue. So scalability, you actually might be spending more per cap than I am.
And Miriam, you have a background in creating videos specifically for the arts, but currently you're working with all kinds of brands. So I would love to hear from you. You know, as marketers, I think we all have faced this issue, and Eric touched on this with the Cinnovative videos of creating something out of nothing. If you are at the beginning of a season or a show has not started rehearsals yet, not having assets, or having one day where one person is available to shoot and a set drawing. And I think that as a video artist in a production kind of role, you and your team know how to convey a feeling without necessarily having access to those assets and things. So if you could talk a little bit about how you begin that process and what marketers should think about if they are hiring a third party to create their content.
Well, I always found working in the arts that you actually come with a lot of assets built in, which is, you know, truly incredible. Like for one, most of the time you're not paying for talent. You know, in the case of New York City Ballet, you have these built-in dancers. You know, in a museum, you have this built-in artwork. There's always a plethora of assets to work from. You know, in terms of like if the show is a musical, you have music that you're already accessing. So it actually cuts back on a huge amount of costs that like we would face in, let's say, a branded video for a brand where all of those elements have to be considered in the budget. So right off the bat, there are more assets than you're probably thinking about. The other big thing I think is just the ability to have access, you know, and figuring that out early on. You know, when we go in to shoot something, let's say at a theater, the most successful situations that I've been in is when you find that all the teams within the organization are talking to each other. So where you have kind of buy-in from the marketing team, who obviously wants to create this video for the marketing purposes, but as Karen mentioned, where you have when the development team, education, especially if you're creating institutional videos, or stage management, where everyone is talking to each other before my team even gets in the process, because it allows us to really access those spaces in a way that creates a really beautiful video. So I think that's a big thing that we love to be involved in at the beginning when we come into a situation. It's not only knowing what assets we have to work with, but how much access we're going to have to work with. And then I think from there, the most kind of important thing that happens is that creative conversation. You know, it's really challenging when you're in the day-to-day, I think, of marketing, you know, a bunch of different shows or, you know, an overall institution, to really stop and think, you know, creatively, what are we trying to achieve with this video? Where is this brand moment coming into play? Like, is this a spontaneous moment that we're trying to capture, an opening night, you know, some sort of like celebrity moment, or is this really a branded moment? You know, is it everything from like, is it a TV spot or is it a educational video where it's like this is telling the story of how this all came together? So that creative question is really important for a third party to come in and kind of know the background on, and then also to be involved in, you know, what's the overall creative for the video? What are we trying to achieve? What not only like what does it look like, but what, as to your point, what does it feel like? So to me, involvement in that creative process is really important. And I think trying to get directors involved from the video side really early on in those creative conversations makes all the difference. Because a lot of times when you hire a third-party crew or team, you already have kind of a concept that you want them to execute on. But it's like putting on a show, really, like not involving the video team in those creative discussions is going to affect the end product. And I think that was always a challenge, depending on what types of things I was working on. It's when do we get brought into the process? Because arriving at a theater and being told to like shoot interviews with different actors or different directors of the actual show is great. But having been involved in that overall process, I think at the end makes a much better product of video.
And Roland, you talked a little bit about some of the resources that you found and equipment that you found helpful in kind of hacks to create really high quality but lower cost content from a production standpoint. Is there anything else in that area?
So in the reel, in the video they saw in the reel, that was actually all stock video. That is probably the most expensive piece of video that we're going to create all year. That cost us around $900, and 2 of those clips probably accounted for a large part of that money. So that's created at the very, very beginning part of our season announcement process. It's lack of any key art, graphical elements, things of that sort. So a lot of those clips were chosen kind of like to give our audiences what a visual representation would be of our season, and also just lets us to visually do things that we just don't have the capability of doing right now. Like for example, that little snippet of native gardens. I mean, me shooting a video of a lawn gnome getting blown up versus finding something that somebody already did in 4K is pretty much like a no-brainer direction to have gone.
It's a really smart way to use the dollars that you have, to be honest. I mean, that's why sometimes, when you're deciding what type of video to do, there's a lot to be said for animation and, really figuring out what talent you need. Because sometimes, like to Roland's point, that's a perfect video, and we've done tons of animated videos. But having a strong editor, animator, post team, having that money allocated to kind of stock resources can really do so much. So it's kind of good to think about trying to use your resources in a different way, depending on what's available to you.
Well, and to that point, I would love to hear from each of you about what is your biggest limitation in the work that you do day to day with video, and how do you work around that? Do you want to start, Miriam?
When you say limitation, I mean, I'm a producer, so most of my limitations come production-wise. I would say in this space, I touched on it earlier, the logistics of trying to shoot sometimes is not a limitation, but it's the most challenging thing that I'm dealing with day in and day out. So it can, like I said, the more people collaborating to try to make those processes easier, is always ideal.
I mean, I think anybody always wants more money, right? But let's put that aside for a second. I think the challenges that we face in the building is time. Almost all of our content, or a large percentage of our content, requires our dancers to be shot for it. And they have incredibly hectic schedules. They're working Tuesday through Sunday from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. They have 1 day off a week. Add to that, they're all their own brands in themselves, and when they have days off, when they're on layoff weeks, they scatter like cockroaches, for lack of a better term, and they're not around. So Monday is a sacred day in our building for my department and the press department, and there's only so many of those in a year, and we're all pulling for those days that are available to be able to create this content, to have them be able to do press opportunities, to have them be able to do promotional appearances, all of those things. So that's a very, very big obstacle for us right now. I think the other thing is the rules and regulations that we also work under. Dancers need to work under a certain set of environments for safety because their instrument needs to be protected, and we hold that first and foremost for us. And so, it does require a lot of planning. Oftentimes it requires extra money to bring in stages for them to actually dance on. But we've kind of worked around all those things, and every year, as those budgets grow, we are able to do more and more of those things. And then also, it's incredibly expensive to shoot in our own theater because of the regulations from Local 1 unions, from, from all of the unions that are in the space. And so we are very infrequently actually shooting in our own space. We're using sound stages, studios, you name it. And those are some of the things that we have to work around.
I think for me, time is one of my most valuable resources. It's also a huge limitation as well. One thing that I found is coming up with a clear content strategy. What are we trying to say for the season? What are we trying to say for this show? In previous life, I used to be a journalist, so definitely putting on that old reporter hat and just coming up with a clear editorial budget of kind of like what we're trying to accomplish and say for that particular season and show. So because we, for the most part, we have very limited access to our artists and to the show itself. So when it's time to shoot B-roll, I pretty much only have 30 minutes to be able to get everything that I need to be able to sell that whole entire show. So I need to be very clear what I need to capture. So definitely forming a great communication, great relationship with our artistic side and stage management is definitely key to kind of like leveraging some of that limitation.
I've also often said that working in the live entertainment space as a video producer, you feel like a real second-class citizen because there's so many priorities that you work with. Like, stage management has their priorities. Like, even if you're shooting a piece on the props, they have their own things. Like, the show is the most important thing. But we've seen the most success when we're actually allowed that time to work with those different teams, because it is super challenging to go in and have to shoot a B-roll for a show, let's say, when there isn't a good spot in the house for the camera, when that hasn't been a discussion. Like the amount of how fast quality goes up when those conversations have been had and when there's a little bit more collaboration with the video team that then has to go in and capture that stuff, it goes a long way, I'm just saying.
So what would you say your biggest, perhaps, mistake has been that you've made around video? What would you have done differently in a given scenario?
I mean, I think when working in performing arts spaces, as I was saying, I think the hardest thing is perhaps not talking to the right people from a production standpoint when we go in. And as I was saying before, it's like just not having that creative top-level discussion before and having everybody kind of on the same page when we go to shoot. It's like once you shoot it, once you're at that point where you're in production, all those conversations that haven't been had, you can't, unless you're going to pay for reshoots, the moment has passed. So I think those two big things.
I mean, I think for us, I'd like to think we don't make mistakes because I don't like to make people feel like any have been made, but to just kind of pinpoint it to one thing, and I'll take it back to a comment that I made earlier about the fact that everything that we do, we like to have longevity with it. We like to be able to, even though we're making it in season A, we like it to be able to return in an evergreen way to be able to be used in season H, and there's one piece of content that we used to make that we no longer make, and they were called dancer screen tests, and it was just a way for the audience to get to know dancers, shot black and white, really simple question and answer kind of capture. And these are humans. We very quickly learned that, okay, we may have shot that video when that person was a core. 3 years later, they were a principal dancer, and then we're watching it to release it for that year, and we're like, damn, we cannot do that, or we have to go back into editing. So it's like position agnostic, but then what even kind of pushed us out of it a little bit further was they grow and they change, and sometimes the answers that they ask or that they give us, they're not happy with 3-4 years later. Or they were in a relationship back then and they mentioned their boyfriend or their husband and now they're divorced or broken up. And so we kind of just shelved that content completely. So I think it's future-proofing all the time for when we are capturing so that we have that library that we can use and dip into again and again without having to make edits to it.
There's a specific moment last season when I created this video to support advanced ticket sales for Skeleton Crew, and sort of forgot that, forgot about, theater is about people, places, and for this particular video, decided to focus more on the setting. So give you a little background, if for those of you not familiar with the show, it's set in one of the last auto stamping facilities in the United States during the 2008 Great Recession. So kind of was drawn more towards what the characters were doing versus, it was like a really rare whiff for our marketing department. I spent so much time trying to get schematics of GM parts, and then I did this whole animation of all of this, coming all together. And then, as I was like, playing through the video, I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? I sunk so much time into this, and it needs to go out. So just powered through, and just the whole sunk cost fallacy in it. And at the end, we kind of had to pivot away from that original marketing direction, and went back to focusing on the people, the actors, and what was actually the point of the show. So I think that was something I'd like to take back.
Well, hearing you talk about the logistical pieces of that particular show versus the heart and the storytelling, I think we talked at one point, the three of us on a call, about this idea of the artistic concern that can happen around ruining the surprise, and this idea that if somebody sees the greatest moment in your play or your ballet or whatever it is in a video, they won't want to come see it on stage, which is in sharp contrast with how the Hollywood works, right? Like the 10 best shots of a movie trailer, or the 10 best shots of a movie are what's in the trailer, and then you see the movie and it's terrible. So, do we think, why hasn't that translated to the performing arts, and is that something that you've grappled with and made decisions around?
I mean, I've personally never understood it. When I worked on Broadway shows, we would get that note a lot. Well, you don't want to misrepresent what the show is, and obviously a lot of the times if it was a new show, nobody had seen it, so, there could be that disconnect. But I never have really understood it, because I think what you're trying to give people a sense of, an audience a sense of, is how you'll feel when you're sitting in that theater seeing it. It's the same idea of a trailer. It's like, you want to see this because it makes you feel like this is going to be amazing, or this is going to be cool, or there's a certain overall sense of it that you want people to take away that gets them to buy a ticket, a movie ticket or a theater ticket. And so I've never really understood that. I think put your best foot forward, make it look as cool as it could possibly look, and then let them get to the theater and then decide. I mean, we all know this, a theatrical experience, a performing arts experience is such a unique in and of itself, people being there, it's never gonna take away from it having seen a video of what it could potentially be. So I've never understood it.
We don't have the same kind of problem, and that's a logistic issue with New York City Ballet. We don't spend 18 months developing a show. We don't have the luxury of being in previews where we're shooting B-roll of something and then we're creating a television commercial with it. When we say concept video, we truly mean concept video, because sometimes we are creating, especially for our world premieres, which can be made in 2 weeks, and hit the stage, and they're back off again in 4 to 6 performances, and then may come back 6 months or 2 years later. So we don't think about it in that sense. Sometimes we don't have anything. We don't have a costume. We don't have a set, because we barely use sets at New York City Ballet. So we don't deal with that. But I will say that overall, to this point, when we started to kind of step into this realm a little more, there was some hesitation on the institution's part to don't show the backstage, the magic, what happens here, because in ballet, and this is not an isolated thing, but those dancers, they're athletes, and they work very hard, and what they're doing is incredibly hard on stage, but they're never allowed to make it look hard. And so the smile has to be on. You get to see the sweat if you're sitting in the first or second row, or the shaking, but that's their job, is to make everything look pretty, regardless of how ridiculously difficult it is what they're doing. So there was an apprehension to be like, well, how can we show all of this? But I think people in the building, I'm lucky in that I have a lot of forward-thinking people on, both administrative and artistic side of things, knowing that this is just the way things are. This is what people want, and they want access, and they want to know everything, and we're not fighting it.
Yeah, so in our marketing department, we don't believe in spoilers in theater. With the videos that we produce, I always shoot the most engaging, best parts of the show, because you never really know, which of the videos that we post up, what people are going to see. We believe in, putting your best foot forward and then just letting them decide to come see the show or not. So I think one of the biggest wins that I've had this season was pitching this concept that we got from some of our peer institutions, that the more transparent that you are with what the show is about, what the story is, and what you're trying to get people to invest 2 hours of their time and their money into, is just be as upfront as possible as you can about it. So we created this feature called Spoiler Alert, and what we have is we have our artistic director and our director. They're just right in front. I just set up a video and I just let them talk. Like, what is the show about? And there's this natural tendency for artistic to kind of like withhold what the show's about, the spoilers, the surprises, and when you tell them just speak, just say what the show's about, then you get this rich, sort of like the reason why this show was selected in the first place, right? And I think that it's really had a really positive effect in terms of sales, and also just to put our artistic team out there, that devotes a lot of time and work into this artistic piece, just to get a better representation of what this play is coming from them versus the marketing team.
Miriam, do you think that there are things that the arts, and particularly nonprofit arts, can learn from the content being created by perhaps bigger brands?
I think for the most part, like been discussing, there's a lot that's happening, that's going well in arts marketing and the videos that are being created. I think the biggest thing, when I've worked with really large brands, is again, it's like there is just so much strategy built into the different stories that we're telling, and it's always nice too when you work with these large brands that their first conversation isn't about like, where is this video going to go? I think sometimes people get in the weeds where it's like, okay, we want this to live on Facebook and Instagram, and so what does that mean? Sound on or sound off? And you can have like a 20-minute, 30-minute conversation about like deliverables, but not so much about like overall brand strategy and the brand story that you're telling. Whereas like the video that we watched with the Jones New York piece that we did, it was a collaboration between Glamour Magazine and Jones New York. It was branded content, and the idea was that we want to tell the story about the types of women that wear Jones New York, that what their struggles that they go to be entrepreneurs, to be performers. And so we profiled a bunch of different women, and it was really about their story, and the Jones New York element was so secondary that those are the kinds of things I think people really connect with. And I think it's already happening in the art space, but that to me is always the biggest takeaway. It's like, where's this connection with people, by showing them stories and moments that they really want to be a part of. I think that's always kind of the direction we should be heading in.
It's a perfect segue, because you brought up the different formats, and I wanted to ask you all how you are prioritizing all of the different formats, knowing that a video looks very different on Facebook versus Instagram versus television versus YouTube. So what are the rankings, if any, and how are you factoring that in when you're planning for a video?
I'm interested to hear what you say.
Karen.
You want to go? I guess there's a couple changes that has kind of forced our hand in the last couple years as new platforms come on and as attention spans shorten and all those types of things. When we started, we loved to make a 5 to 6 minute video. And I would say even 5 years ago, we still love to make a 4 to 5 minute video. And we started to, we're really forced ourselves to cut down. Perfect instance is yesterday we were discussing a concept and choosing a director for a concept piece that we're doing for a piece in our rep this winter, and we just said 30 seconds, that's what this is going to be. But as a rule now, anytime we create content, for the most part, we're creating either 60 or 90, 30s and 15s. Because it's got to go everywhere. And we do, by broadcast, we have all of the platforms that you talked about. The one thing we have not done yet, which I know my team is constantly asking for it, but it's some ways we haven't figured it out from a budgetary, not so much from even a budgetary standpoint, but from a time standpoint, like I said, that's a commodity for us, is shooting vertical for Instagram stories. So that's where our editor comes in handy, that's in-house. We're shooting everything for traditional widescreen format, I guess, and we're going down we're editing down and zooming in for different formats right now.
Thought you were gonna say TikTok, but.
We don't do TikTok, although I did love that. I did read that story the other day about the girlfriends who are recording their boyfriend's nasty voicemail messages now on TikTok and releasing them, and I thought it was quite brilliant, actually.
Yeah, so when we first started, our videos were around 2 minutes long, but we've really tried to make a concerted effort to keep chopping that down. So we're also our target is around 30 seconds with pretty much long format. We consider it to be 1 minute, and then spoiler alert is more of a extreme outlier. We kind of just like let the director and our artistic director talk as long as it need be to get the point out. So that's kind of like a one-off. I think our last one was around 6 minutes, and that's a bit long, but I think it serves a purpose if you're looking for that particular bit of content as to like what a show is. I mean, I think that it doesn't serve a purpose for it to be 2-3 minutes long. So I think that's one outlier out of that.
And use is definitely dictating that, but also you have to know your audience, because we have people on our subscriber base. For instance, they will sit and watch a video that is still 3, 4, 5 minutes long. And so there's different types of content that we know is never going to be more than 30 seconds, and some we're still doing 3.5 minutes of, and we just know where we're putting it, and we know who we're putting it in front of. I have a number of teams just in my department alone that are using this. The digital team that oversees our web, all of our digital properties, including social, an acquisition marketing team who's doing a lot of the digital marketing and working most closely with Capacity, and then a relationship marketing team who is also working with Capacity in a little less way than the acquisition crew is. But intel from Capacity every year tells us what we should making and where we should be putting it. And then there's other things like we call them ballet briefings that go to our subscribers, and we know we can attach a video that's 3 minutes there, a little bit more in depth, they're a little more engaged with us. So, it doesn't always have to be 15 seconds, it doesn't always have to be 30. Know your audience, know the type of content you're creating, and what your objective is with putting it out there.
And I do think in this space that makes the most sense, but larger video trends for sure. I mean, what we talk about more now with brands that we hadn't so much in the past is like for specific brands, it may be that like a short film, something that is like, let's say a 10-minute short film, maybe something that really helps convey the brand story. So it's something that they're willing to invest in, and it's kind of exciting to be in a world where now even that type of format is something that people can use in their marketing efforts. So for sure, I think it is your audience. Because on the editorial side, a lot of the stuff that we do is like 10 minutes long, 15 minutes long. There's always somebody that will watch something if the content is good and it's compelling and they're interested in it. And I know at the last session we were talking about influencers, we work with them a lot, and a lot of their content can be like 15, 20 minutes long, and sometimes I'm shocked that people sit through it, but it's very successful. So I do think it's the audience, and it's also the quality of the content, or just the interest factor, people stick around. For the vertical, like Instagram Live, we've done a lot of things in the fashion space recently. A lot of fashion shows will now go live on Instagram stories. So it's definitely a production challenge, but it's a really interesting way that they're using that. And again, people stick around for a full 15-minute fashion show in their Instagram stories. So it's a lot to be done, I think, as things move forward.
And how are you, since this is a data-driven audience, how are you measuring the success of your video content beyond, of course, increases in sales that you're seeing when these are out in the world? Are you paying attention to other metrics, and how are you prioritizing those other metrics?
I mean, obviously, return from a sales perspective is first and foremost for us. We do look at that, and that does kind of shape some of our activities. I mean, we find that this is so important too. I don't like to put a lot of KPIs against this because I don't want to discourage the team from doing things and trying new things and having that, you know, having that lead the strategy for us. If I can back up to a minute, that kind of brought us to video to begin with during that strategic planning session back in 2009, I guess it was. You know, it was audience development. It was bringing, you know, speaking to people where they were, where we are. And, you know, we have changed the face of our audience in the last 5 to 7 years, and video has definitely played a large part in that. You know, 2 patron studies we've done now 5 years apart, and the first one showed that we had about 29% Gen X and Gen Y in our house. Now we're at 50%. And the biggest slice of growth for us was Gen Y. It went from 5 to 17%. So we definitely feel like this, among other factors in the institution, is supporting and changing and allowing us to build the future audience for New York City Ballet.
I think in terms of analytics, you know, it definitely, you know, highlights things that, you know, like you would kind of think that your traditional theater audience is older, primarily white, but our video analytics sort of, you know, tries, you know, paints the opposite of that. You know, like I was just looking at our analytics last night for our current show, and you know, I was surprised to see that our second largest audience was 25 to 34, and then if you combine that to 18 to 25, I mean, those 2 demographics, you know, I think the videos that we just put out for the show was really resonating for that group. And of course, you know, you have the 65 plus crowd as well, which is sort of like this that sort of curve. So I think there is a part of analytics that you can use to see how your videos are also engaging, but also to point out. Sometimes you also have to ignore it at times because there are just some messaging that you have to do that speaks against, you know, what your analytics are saying. Like, for example, this video that we made, it was clearly directed towards our top 5, top 10% supporters, and even though it was a video chronicling the construction of our facility, and that piece of video is pretty much going to be the single most important piece of video that our theater is going to have for the next 100 years that building is going to be up. So, that group of people had a lot to do to get us to that point. So I think, you know, while that video doesn't have a lot of resonance with 90% of the people that do consumer video, for that 10%, it's super important. So again, you know, you just have to really gauge your audience. You know, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? And yes, analytics is super important to kind of like gauge what you're trying to do, where you want to go. But sometimes you kind of have to ignore that too as well.
Okay, well, I asked about mistakes, so before we go to questions, let's end on a win. If you want to tell us what you're proudest of in your video career, whether it's a specific project or just an evolution that's happened.
I mean, I think for New York City Ballet, I think our team was really proud of a piece that we put out last year for our run of Sleeping Beauty. It was very alternative for the institution. It did not depict dance at all. It was, you know, very tongue-in-cheek. And I think what was really great about it was, as is everything in that building, it was a collaborative effort. And one of the dancers came on to write the treatment and direct the video for us. And we were all very, very proud of it. And we received a lot of compliments on the piece because it was so different than what we have or have been doing. I think also, you know, we talk about the content that we're creating for marketing, but I think definitely a highlight for New York City Ballet was, you know, self-producing a feature-length doc a handful of years ago, back in 2012. And that started with shooting for a concept video and then understanding that we had something more here and a bigger story to tell. And then we literally crowdsourced funding for it, and a movie was produced and distributed in theaters, on every streaming channel, and that was a big thing for us. It's not something that anyone can do all the time. It's certainly nothing that we've replicated again. Oops, sorry about that. but it's always at our sites. So the bigger projects that really serve the brand are always something that we're talking about in the institution, and that's not a budgeted figure, so that's always incremental, and it's projects that we find that might be important, and it takes a lot of time to develop those, and like most of the time they don't happen. So, but that was a highlight for the institution too.
I think a good win just in general is, just got to credit my institution to just, they've been really receptive to what video can do. So during each of the past 3 seasons, they've really humored me, whenever I'm wanting to increase their capabilities. Like last season, got them to buy a 360 camera, and then we were able to do a lot of really cool things with that, really go into the whole VR aspect. And, it came really handy documenting the build of the theater and, really documenting, a lot of things. It really revolutionized B-roll as well, we were able to do some really cool pop-up video type stuff, that's really cool, just both on your phone and from a VR visor. And then just this past season, got them to purchase a drone, and we're able to really capture things that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do with our current equipment in our new space, since it's so much larger than our previous venue. So I think that was a good win for us.
So many proud moments. One of my favorite things to work on the Broadway space was, being able to be a part of when Wicked started in the original, these music videos that they did, where it took the different songs in Wicked and kind of reimagined them and, did them as like country versions of the song or more pop versions of the song. And we shot with Adina and Kristen to create a music video that, just did this stripped back version of it. That stuff was just fun, and it was really exciting to, be in the Broadway space at the moment where video content really kind of started to grow, and there were different opportunities to kind of tell like all these amazing show stories that wasn't just like a one-off TV commercial. It was really like going in and creating content that people are obsessed with. It's such a pleasure to be a part of that kind of stuff. So, and I love seeing how much is getting created now. It's really fun.
All right, I think we've got 6 minutes for questions. So mic people can distribute mics.
Someone in the center there.
Hi, thank you for coming to share today, and I'm loving all the beautiful videos that have been created today. I just had a kind of a general question with the video content and how you distribute it, and do you use it through advertising, just on social media content? Do YouTube pre-rolls make any sense anymore? Just wanted to check on how that has been working for you, or what your thoughts are.
All of our content is rolling out everywhere. So it's on our YouTube channel, it's on our Instagram channel, it's on our Facebook, it's on Twitter, it's on all of our social platforms. It's being used in the theater, on our screens in there. It's being used extensively, obviously, on our own website, and then it does make it into advertising as well. So when we have like mini campaigns where we're elevating and we're investing in an additional marketing dollars, they all make it into obviously digital advertising too.
Pretty much the same. I think one sort of avenue that I'm trying to hope that we can get into is get into the streaming advertising as well. There's a side of me that the marketer side of me is like, yeah, I think that's like a great opportunity. But then when I'm watching it at home, I'm like upset, seeing this on Hulu, but that's like an avenue aside from the usual social and web and digital channels that we want to kind of get into.
Four minutes.
Hi there. I'm wondering, you might not have an answer to this, but I'm wondering if you have any like tips or tricks that you've found with routing your videos or getting approvals, not letting it get bogged down in that process and not letting it just not get made because of it.
I think it really helps to kind of plan out what it is that you're trying to do and get buy-in that way. By the time I'm shooting B-roll, I already had conversations with our director of communications, with artistic, stage management, production, so everybody has buy-in in the process. And I think whenever I've done that and I try to make that SOP, if I've gotten buy-in from everybody, I mean, I think that everybody's pretty much, just greenlit whatever it is that I want to do, pretty much.
It's the same for us. Not all of our content has to go through the channels, so not everything is being seen by everyone. There's an amount of trust that has been given to my department that we don't have to run everything up the flagpole. That said, when we are doing concept shoots or bigger projects, treatments are approved before, so they know what we're doing, and then they're just kind of seen, and not much weigh-in happens at that point. On things where there's dancers talking about the repertory or something that there needs to be accuracy checks, then our artistic department does look at that. But it's a pretty smooth process for us now, and we just put deadlines on things. And we've learned that if we don't hear back, we go. And we'll say sorry later.
But I think you bring a good, the best point there too is getting sign off before you even start shooting, because at that point it's too late. But I'd say from the opposite end of getting comments and feedback is the more that it's streamlined, and I know it's a pain, but having it route through one person is hugely helpful to trying to maintain a timeline, and also having someone that can make sure that there's not conflicting comments, because a lot of the times when we're editing videos for an institution, let's say, we get a lot of conflicting feedback, and it's hard to really streamline the editing process when you're just not sure who to listen to. I think that's a huge one. And there is now for video software that, when you present it, like you can put in comments directly in the edit. And I would always say, if you're looking at a video and you have a comment, give a time code. Like it's hard to when someone's like, oh, there's this part where this guy says this, like just put a time code on it. It'll get it done so much faster. So I think it's a great question.
It's also important for your staff to have a keen eye. So from artistic standpoints, all of the people in my department know what dance should look like. We're never going to put anything in a video that doesn't look right technically. And then I think for content purposes, it's more about knowing your institution's tolerance and what they're going to go for and what they're not going to go for, and that's important too.
Another practical one is also just, there's when you're in the editing process, graphics will come in later. Most of the changes that we make on videos are graphic changes. So they have nothing to do with the actual video. It's like someone saying, there's a change on the end card. So routing that through everybody first before it even gets to an editor is a really good idea, because that's really not even the editor's job a lot of the times, and that is something that people get really bogged down in.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Fuentes from the LFO, and I have a question about licensing. So we're a music organization and we have music, but a lot of times we're promoting new pieces or pieces that actually hasn't been recorded, and that has been our issue with putting videos out, getting clearances. So we've gone back and forth about hiring folks to handle for us or having our internal team handle licensing. How do you handle that? How do you budget for that?
Well, like I said, that's one of the assets that's really great to have when you work on a lot of performing arts stuff. It's built in for regular videos, not regular, but for let's say brand videos. Music is a huge part of it. Right off the bat, too, if it's a discussion, usually it's a big part of the discussion. It's like, are we using stock music, something where it's already rights managed, and that kind of depends on how much you budget for it. Because there's a plethora of sites out there now that you can get music that's already had all the rights cleared for it, knowing where the uses is going to be. So if it's going to just be digital only, or if it's going to go to broadcast, or if it's a video that you think is going to start digital only and then moves to broadcast, you always have to consider that the music licensing will be impacted. So, I think it depends on the level of music you're trying to license. For most videos, if it's already something that's rights managed, your budget can safely be, if it's digital use only, in under $600. But then as soon as you go to a known artist, then it's a much bigger question. So I think if you are ever doing a piece where you need to consider music, it should be a very big discussion up front because there's a lot of factors that go into it.
I mean, for us, when we're doing something that's not specifically tied to a piece of rep, public domain, wherever you can, obviously, that goes without saying. But, and I would love it if the rights that we were paying to perform it on the stage covers what we're using to promote it too. We're not there, obviously, that's never gonna be the case, but there's someone on my team who has those relationships with those publishers also. And it's really about relationship building, and sometimes they're super cool with us because we're doing it so often, and we don't invest a lot in that, but we've never not been able to use the pieces of music that we can. And then there's somewhere you'll have a staff change at that publishing house, and then all of a sudden what you paid $300 for 6 months ago, now somebody wants 10 grand for. So again, it's building relationships. It's sometimes on the rare occasion having to abandon, but it's also knowing what music you're using beforehand.
Yeah.
We've been in a situation, that would be a mistake that we learned from. Buying into a piece of music that we all loved, that we thought was integral to the concept of the piece, and not being able to get the rights. And then
Yeah.
you're just so let down, and nothing else sounds as good afterwards.
Yeah. Well, and there's also a lot of music. If you are like an institution that needs a lot of a music library to select from, there's so many sites now that like the range in quality, but like it may be worth it to have a subscription so that you have more of a library to choose from.
Right.
Okay, we're out of time, but enjoy the break. See you back here at 3:15.